podcasts.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to welcome you to day 7, February the 7th, 2025, in our series of World Interfaith Harmony fortnight, in our case. Wonderful sessions with many people from around the world. So I would like to start really with a land acknowledgement. So this is for remembering often where we are and just having that sense of the past, present and future, land, sea and air. We acknowledge and honor the interconnectedness of all beings, including the cosmos, the earth, indigenous peoples, our ancestors and all of creation. We are grateful to all who came before us as part of the network of life on our planet. We recognize that as part of the life on Earth, our responsibility is to care for the land, gifts and relationships that sustain us. We commit to approaching every interaction with reverence, reciprocity, harmony, and passion. In healing ourselves, we heal the world. So remembering that, I would like to introduce Margaret, who is from Interfaith Alignment. And actually, Margaret and I have been working closely with Steve within the RISE sector. So Margaret's become one of our very active partners. So I'm very grateful that she's now here to join us today and introduce Urzula.
Thank you, Morgana. What an absolute pleasure it is to be working with you in the RISE sector of the Charter of Compassion, and to have Interfaith Alignment partner with you for these very moving presentations we've had for a week and another week to go. So thrilled about that. And happy to see you all here as well. And it is my deep honor to introduce you all now to my dear friend, the Reverend Dr. Urzula Glienecke. Urzula is originally from Latvia, is a theologian, an incredible artist, and an activist, and deeply engaged in interfaith work. She's currently working and living in Scotland, and working as a chaplain at the University of Edinburgh. And she is a member of the Iona Community. And if you don't know about the Iona Community, then look that up. It is a center for justice and peace that has spread throughout the world, but based on a little island off the west coast of Scotland, and is a board member of Interfaith Alignment. And I hand you over to these most capable and wonderful hands of Urzula to lead us today in our practice. Thank you, Urzula.
Thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to be with you and so see some faces that I have seen before and others that I haven't. My water region, actually I have two. I live at the North Sea and at the river, which is called Water of Leith. But I grew up at the Baltic Sea, or how we call it in Latvian, the Amber Sea, because when there are storms, amber comes out of the sea and you can find it on the beach, because in olden days, actually the sea was a forest. Now it's covered in water, and as the storms churn the water, the precious stone comes up. I grew up also among many lakes, an area where people have been living for a very long time. And very recently, actually, very unusual archaeologists brought Latvian history of inhabitation of the land back more than 10,000 years to what it was thought before. Can you imagine what kind of archaeologists they were? They were not human. They were beavers. Beavers were digging around an area in not very far from where my grandmother actually lives. I will show you some pictures of the area later. And they found some tools and some music instruments made by reindeer hunters and herders during the Ice Age. And so we have, for those of you who joined us yesterday, listening to stories of Finnish and Sami people, we have a connection there. We have a connection of the region, we have the connection of the Baltic Sea, but also many, many traditions. We are talking about the cold time of the year. In Latvia, we don't have minus 45 Celsius. We have more like half of that, but it's still very cold. So there is a very, very strong sauna culture. And as in language of some yesterday, the steam or the atmosphere in the sauna also in Latvian is the same word as the word for spirit, the spiritual place. And now allow me to share some images and some stories with that. So can you all see that? This is an area called Araiši. It is quite close to where I grew up. I grew up between two places. I grew up partially in Riga, which is the capital city of Latvia, which is also the capital of Art Nouveau architecture, and also a place on the countryside, very close to Estonian border, although there were no borders when I grew up because we were occupied by Soviet Union and there was no border between the 15 republics, and Latvia and Estonia were part of that. In this area, people had been living at least since Bronze Age, and this is the lake on which they were living. There was a town discovered, which was built in Bronze Age on small islands in the lake to protect people from wild animals and also enemies. And as a child, I was one of the people together with Latvian scientists who rebuilt that place. And just imagine what was at the very heart of that Bronze Age town. It was a sauna. It was a place of warmth. It was a place where people found healing, where people were born, where people had their last days of life. And that was in there in the middle. And I am very inspired by the resilience of nature. The cultures around the North Sea and the Baltic Sea experience a lot of harsh weather. Storms and snows and very cold weather and winter time. So we have learned a lot of resilience, and also that community holding together is very important to survive. We are not the same, but we are related souls living in the shadow of a big aggressive country from which you have heard a lot during the last years. It's Russia, and we have been occupied by Russia again and again during last 2000 years. Latvia and Estonia have also been occupied by Germany, by Sweden, by Poland, and even Napoleon was there for a short while. Now, the time of the year in February is actually the time of the year when we celebrate the passing of the old year and coming of the new year. It's the time between the old cold winter and the hope of springtime in the region where I grew up. This is approximately in the pictures what you see how it looked before the climate change. Now things are different. When I grew up, snow would come sometime in December and stay there continuously until March or April. And then slowly, the nature would wake up again. Now you have cold weeks and then you have warmer weeks. Snow comes and goes. But this is how I grew up. And to reflect that, I wanted to share the names of the months in my own language. We start with December, and December is called Vilkumēnesis, the month of the wolves. That was the time when wolves came out from the forests because they were cold and hungry. January is Salmēnesis, the month of the frost. And now we are just in the month of candles, Svečumēnesis, the time when it's still dark, but we hope for the light of the spring to come. March is Sārsnumēnesis, the month where the crust grows on the snow, because the sun is already strong enough to melt the upper layer of the snow, but at night it freezes again. And if you are a lighter, smaller person, you can even walk over it. And then we have the month of the juices in the birches coming, the leaf month, the flower month, and then the linden tree month. Linden tree, July, is attributed to women. Women in Latvian culture are seen as linden trees, the strong, big, very, very sturdy and life-giving trees. Then there is the tree of bread and the tree of the forest. Then there is the month of the spirits of ancestors. And then we come to November, which is again a month where frost comes back. So big part of the year is quite cold. And as I said, we learn resistance, we learn strength from the nature around us. And I'm also using a lot of these images in my art. So I am working in transparent resin. And the very sweet thing for me is amber, the national gemstone of Latvia, which comes out from the sea in the storm, as I said, is also resin. So there is a resonance there. And here is a sculpture and actually two installations, one outside London in Woking and one in the Abbey of Iona in Scotland, showing the place of Arash and the beginning of spring, the end of winter. You can see here how the amber comes out of the sea. This is a beach after a storm, and if you are lucky, you can find these petrified pieces of resin on the beach. I have been lucky enough to find one, only one in my lifetime. There are people who have more luck than that. And a very moving point to me is that the first mention of the people around the Baltic Sea in the area where I grew up in both Roman and Greek literature, first written mention of our people, is for two things. One is for amber, a lot of Greek and Roman amber, which is very valued in the art and jewelry, came from the Baltic Sea. And the other thing that our people were known for were strong witches. So be aware. There is a very, very strong culture in our place, and we have needed that. As I said, we were occupied by Soviet Russia for 50 years, and I grew up in the middle of that occupation. Our borders were closed. There was no freedom of faith or of thought. And a lot of people, actually more people than were killed in Nazi camps, were deported to work camps in Siberia, including my family, our family's closest friends. And it was a very oppressive system, especially if you were not conformed with the system, if you belonged to a minority group like the Baltic people did. I was sent to a Russification school as a child, which meant that we were a minority of Latvian speakers in a Russian-speaking school and had much less freedom and privileges, and also there was quite a lot of violence and oppression around it. But my people never gave up hope. There were stories put into songs and into fairy tales, into art, of hope that we will be independent and free again. My grandmother told it to me. I told it to other children at school, and we hoped, and we started to protest as soon as it was possible. And then in 89, the Baltic people joined hands through Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, all the way as a human chain, to show to the world that we want to be free. And I was part of this chain at that time. The Russian military activated itself. It was still in the countries, but it took over communication centers and the newly formed governments. We formed independent governments as soon as it was possible and tried to become independent countries. And as a teenager of 17, I was on the barricades all the time. We didn't have weapons. We had songs. When we were singing and praying, and there were people who had all faiths and none. Most of us didn't have faith. And we were hoping that the world would see us, that the world would do something about the oppression that was happening in the countries, and also give us a chance to be free, to be who we are with our own languages, with our own freedom, with freedom of thought and freedom what we wanted to believe. And it happened. There is power and strength in song. There is power and strength in story and in art. And I wanted to share with you something very special that happens every 4 years. My family was part of starting it about 150 years ago, and that is the Song and Dance Festival. Last time I was there, we had a choir of 18,000 people singing together with 40,000 in the public, and we had 18,000 dancers. And this is a tradition which has brought us through the hardest of times and occupations and oppressions. There is strength in song. And one of the main songs of that festival, which very much inspires me and also my art, is this. Sorry, 1 to 4.
Mārtiņš Brauns un Rainis, Saule, Pērkons, Daugava.
Dirige Romāns Vanaks.
some of that resilience, some of that resistance is in me and is what has brought me through the occupation of Latvia, also through being excluded as a woman from leadership in my own church, my home church, Latvian Lutheran Church. They changed in mid-90s and excluded women from being ordained ministers, which changed my life forever and life of many other women and also many of the LGBTQ plus community. People had to leave the country, or people were not able to do what they were called and wanted to do, really. So I continued studying. I became a theologian instead of ordained minister for a while. And also I turned to art. Art has been part of my life from the very beginning. As soon as I could move my hands, I started to make things out of the filling of the chair I was sitting on, out of a little piece of wood I found somewhere, out of wool. And so for a while I did art as a different type of language. And also I started to write poetry together with art. And here is a poem that was written recently for Interfaith Alignment for the Calendar of Light we did. And for me, it reflects the situation in the world right now. I was writing it as I saw the developments in the USA, developments in Gaza and Ukraine and around the world, where more and more of right-wing voices become louder and louder, where more and more division is there between people. And I wish from my heart that we would all be human beings together, part of the network of life of this earth, as we said, and care for each other and be together in this beautiful world that we are part of. So here is the poem. Sometimes the dark seems to close up around us, above us, beneath us, within us. The world's situation, cruel deeds, hurtful words, or just life. But at the very heart of the dark, there is a presence, a blessing, a loving touch, a compassion to carry us through. We are not alone. And the sculpture here is placed in the Iona Abbey, a Benedictine building from 14th century, that part approximately, but there has been an abbey since at least the 7th century. And it is a place where people come from all around the world, and it brings together old and new, that also shows resilience. It was a ruin and then it was rebuilt. It was a ruin again and it was rebuilt. It was a ruin for the third time, it was rebuilt. And now again, people come from all around the world, people whose hearts beat for social justice and for environment and for songs and for new ways of being together. And just behind the sculpture, you can see some leaves of farms that are growing in the wall of the abbey. And they are actually good there. They are a sign that the wall is healthy, because this type of wall needs enough humidity that it holds together its old type of mortar. And these plants have been there for a very long time, during it being a ruin and during it being open again as a building. Here is another close picture of a sculpture with a small poem written during the lockdowns, and it is translated into Japanese by 2 students of Edinburgh University, where I work as one of the chaplains. Up, 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 stepping up, walking up, reaching up. growing upwards. Walk the path, ring the bell, you will be heard. Then go out and ring the bell for others to hear, for justice, for freedom, for the world. And as a Iona community, we try to balance contemplation and activism. You can't see it here in the picture, but on the right-hand side on the wall, there are two reliefs. There's a relief of a cat and a monkey. They were put there by the Benedictine monks, and they are a known symbol in their tradition, but also several other traditions of world religions. And they stand for contemplation and activity, for prayer and for work. And it is very important to balance both, to take care of ourselves, but then go out in the world for justice and for freedom of ourselves and others and our environment. And here is another sculpture. I think of it as a dragon. All these sculptures are made drop by drop. It means that they can never be repeated because the resin runs as it wills. It also means that it is a very meditative and very organic process. And I will never completely know or control how the sculpture will come out. This dragon has a broken back. It was broken on the way from Germany to Scotland to the exhibition. But for me, it is even more beautiful because it is broken. It tells the story of brokenness and new beginnings. Droplets dripping, a fire dragon, laughing droplets of life. Every little droplet makes a ripple in the world. It matters. Every little thing matters. And whatever we do, every little thing that we move, every little kindness that we show to others, to the world, to ourselves, matters. It makes a difference. We might not see it in that moment, but it does make a difference. It moves like ripples in the water from one drop to a bigger and bigger ripple around the world, around the people, around other life beings around us, and the whole world and whole universe. Every little kindness, every little act of compassion has its ripples. So let's be part of that in every little way we can and make the world a little bit lighter in dark times. And at times that can be very difficult. Perhaps you have heard the story of the starfish. There's a story that there are two girls walking on a beach, and there are many, many stranded starfish on the sand. And one of the girls is stooping down and putting one after other in the water. And the other girl is saying, "Why are you doing that? There are so many of them. You can't change the world." And the first girl, she takes another starfish and puts it back in water. Says, "No, I can't change the world, but I just changed the world for this one." But in the times when we are active, when we are doing something that really is probably difficult, because things can be dangerous when we stand up against injustices, when we speak truth to power, when we say that things are not right and that things need to change. We need to balance. We need to go one step after other, not the whole staircase, but step by step. And here is a poem from the lockdown to that. Balance, step by step, balance. When the whole way is too much, take just one step, step by step. And sometimes miracles happen on the way. This cross that you can see, the Celtic cross in the picture, is one of them. I don't know if the story is true, but truth doesn't have to be factual. Truth can be something that is meaningful, and this story is meaningful. George MacLeod was a man who founded the Iona Community. He was in the army, and he was actually very good at it. But he discovered during the war how destructive war is. And then actually both sides lose. People lose lives, the land is damaged. And he decided that he wanted to change something. So when he came back to his homeland, Scotland, he decided to study theology, and he became an ordained minister in Church of Scotland. And he started to work in a very deprived, very poor area in Glasgow called Govan. Most people in that community were unemployed builders and shipbuilders. And he worked there. And he says the beginning of Iona Community was a man called Archie. Archie said to the minister, you know, the church says the right things but doesn't do them. And Archie was soon after that found dead, and he had only grass in his stomach. He had starved to death. And that was the point George tells that he decided to bring together students of theology, at that time only men who would become ministers in Church of Scotland, and the unemployed workers. And they rebuilt the abbey buildings. And George really wanted a silver cross for the abbey building, and he was looking for that. And he found a silversmith's shop somewhere in the city, and he found this cross and thought, this is exactly what I want for the rebuilt abbey buildings. And so he asked the silversmith's worker there if he could buy it. And the woman answered, no, you can't buy it. It's not for sale. Why not? Well, my husband made it, and he passed away. And before he died, he said he wanted to give this cross to the Iona Abbey. And here it stands until this moment. And here you see the life in the abbey walls even more, together with the sculpture. The sculpture glows in the dark. If you turn off the light in the abbey when the sculptures were there, you would see green and blue and yellow lights glowing in the dark. In the very last season before the abbey closed for a while for refurbishment, we had a glow-in-the-dark service. We had time together singing and meditating and praying. And then we turned off the lights, and in the dark you could see all the glow, and people just didn't want to leave. They would look at the wonder of the glow, the hope of light in the dark. It was the beginning of winter, late autumn, but we knew that sun would become stronger again and would rise again. And we were there together. We are all connected, she said, the old and the young, the far and the near, the spiritual and the mundane. It is one, so care for all. And to finish my main part, here are some poems that have been written in Scotland during the last years. They have been written in context of the poverty growing in this country. There is a big crisis of the cost of living. There is a huge youth poverty, and there are organizations like Church Action on Poverty and Poverty Alignment working on helping our society to become more healthy and to share more. And these poems are written together with people who have lived experience of poverty. Poverty is like a bike. It is difficult to balance. The less wheels it has, the harder it becomes. I cannot even imagine staying upright on a one-wheeled bike. Walking on a mesh. I'm walking on a mesh, a net. I see through it all the way to the rock bottom. The mesh is fragile, and I wonder if it will hold me. There is not much between me and the fall. Through the camper van's window, I see a tent, a family with 3 kids, an ancient Megane parked beside it. It's pouring. The tent flutters in the wind. They watch football in the tent. Must be crowded at 5 in one tent. The kids are having fun. I'm thinking of the parents, how tired they must be. Little hands and feet pressing against the canvas walls, the baby squealing in glee, a torch like a firefly jumping in the tent. It must be late, if I can see its light. It's June in Scotland. The ash tree moves over the tent, casting a leaf or two on the tiny tent like a caress or a blessing. And finally, soul traveler. She is a soul traveler. She listens to people's stories, the little everyday ones. How someone manages with one income and three kids. How someone else is ashamed to use the food bank. How someone is hungry every day. She listens, immersing into people's stories, and lets herself be touched. She is a soul traveler. She walks beside people's souls for a while. Thank you. So now if anyone has any questions, if anyone would like me to tell anything more about my country, about the history there, about Iona Community, about the art, whichever you would like, I'm here.
Urzula, what an incredibly, incredibly beautiful presentation. Thank you for sharing the art and the poetry that just is woven together in such an amazing way, and your story and your voice that I could listen to all day. Could you comment a little on how you find creative expression from pain?
That's a big one. I would say art grows out of pain. One of my favorite musicians in Latvia, there is a film just made about him, says artworks are born in difficulty, in strife. And very often my experience is, especially if the situation in which you are is really extreme, if it's very, very difficult, and you need an outlet, you need a language to talk about it. And so you sing it out, you shout it out, or you paint it, or in my case, my language is more three-dimensional, so I put it in a sculpture. And it helps. It is in a way a relief and a healing in itself, but also it is a way to share it with the world and to say, yes, it hurts, but there is also hope, there is also beauty, and we can be connected in both. We can carry each other through pain, we can be stronger together, but we can also share things that are beautiful. And as I said, I have a lot of inspiration really from nature. And nature is very, very resilient. Even if we would manage to destroy the planet for ourselves, it would be quite happy without us, probably happier. I hope that doesn't happen. And I find art and community with each other, but also humor very important. And those are things that carry me through this time as well. At times when you want to cry, you need to laugh a little bit in between. Ran has a question, I see.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for this presentation. It's very beautiful, your poetry and your sculptures, and you really is very heartfelt. You can feel them in your heart, you know, and so I thank you for that. But I just had sort of a simple question. On some of your poetry to the right, you had, I guess that's your alphabet or the way you write, and it looked so oriental, kind of, you know. Yeah, or East, yeah.
So Latvian culture is a more oral culture. Our written language, the first one actually was in symbols that were woven in belts. So not a really written one in that sense like letters, but in symbols. And then with the Reformation, actually, when the Bible was translated into Latvian, one written language emerged as it happened in most European countries. But yeah, writing is very important to me, as is a different language, which is the sculpture.
Yeah, and there's still, it seems to me, there still is a lot of symbols in your written language. You know, so
Yes.
some of that was saved.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yes,
I think
it
Ursula,
was. Mhm.
I was going to say, I
Yes.
think maybe referring to the Japanese
Mhm.
that was written.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You mean the Japanese, of course. So, yes, there was English and there was Japanese, so not Latvian. The symbols there, that was Japanese. Latvian you saw in the very, very first picture only. And we have Latin alphabet, but with a lot of extra sounds. So we have many extra birds and tails and things around it. But yeah, thank you, Margaret. I understand now what was meant. Yep, that was Japanese. Anything else? Any questions? Any comments?
Katima has her hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Khatima Fayaz from Afghanistan, and you were present.
We lost your audio, Fatima.
Khatima is another inspiring woman. Khatima, we lost your audio, so whilst you get it back, we'll probably let Steve talk.
I want to thank you so much, Ursula, for your presentation. That was just very inspiring. I also appreciate hearing more about your country, Latvia. That's one country that I really don't know that much about. So it was lovely hearing some of its history and having much more sense of the spirit of your people. That was very touching. I was also touched early on regarding the names of the months of the year and how they reflect on the seasons of Mother Earth. And I wish our months were named like that rather than after the Roman gods. Yeah, I'm jealous of the names of your months. Let me come, that's sort of what it comes down to. And also, I'm really intrigued by your, how you get the resin to do what it's doing. For me, that's a mystery. I've worked with resin, just very basics of it. And I don't expect you to give away your artistic secrets, but how it's like you're drizzling resin and you get it to freeze in midair. And for me, it's a total mystery.
Well, I don't know anyone else who works in the same technique. I knew approximately what I wanted to do, and I was looking for someone to learn from, and I didn't find anyone. So what I did was I experimented. It took me about probably 1.5 years of daily experimenting to get where I am now. And there were many accidents and things. One time, for example, I put scales on a table, I put a measuring glass on it, and I poured resin into the measuring glass, and it disappeared like magic. It melted so fast that it really disappeared. And so the scales melted, and the neighbors came over and asked if we had a gas leak because of the smell. And sometimes things shrink and sometimes they foam and they don't really do what you want them to do. Interestingly, my husband, Michael, he was working with resin at the same time in industry. He was working for Mercedes. And so we could compare our notes and also see that even they, in their very developed German, like technological area, they had their problems. There were times when they had to throw things out of the window in the snow because they got too hot and so on. But in the end, I managed. And in principle, it is similar to when a candle is dripping. So I let one drop run and then it solidifies and then it's followed by next one. And then things develop. At times I really plan what I want to do. I have, for example, a meditation and I know a sculpture that I would like to make for it. And then I work on how to do it. And at times it's completely accidental. One of my favorite sculptures was I had resin with pigment mixed in my measuring glass and it started to get hot. So I knew if I don't do anything now, it would just solidify in the glass and be gone. And so I poured it out. And I needed about 2 years to do that again to have the same effect, more or less. It was just a beautiful kind of organic thing to happen.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to tell a little bit more about my country and my culture. So Latvian is a very ancient language. It's Proto-Indo-European and one of the oldest languages in Europe. We only have one living relative left. So Lithuanian is the only language which is in the same group directly. And as we have had very different history, the languages have developed very differently, so we can't understand each other. You can linguistically see that they are related, but you can't really understand each other. Latvia and Estonian language is Finno-Ugric, so a very different language. We have more similar history. We were occupied by bigger countries for most of the time, and Lithuania was one of the biggest kingdoms in Europe for a long time, together with Poland. And so we developed very differently. One of my favorite examples is the word for thank you. So in Latvian, thank you is paldies, and in Lithuanian, ačiū. And it's not a joke. And we have survived through our language and songs. We have about 3 million folk songs gathered, which are sung in the folk song festival and in the big festival that I showed you, but also at home. And even in all the centuries when we were occupied by other countries, we survived through telling stories and singing songs and keeping our language. And we have only been independent from occupation between the 2 world wars, and now since 91. That is how long we only have our own land. Any other questions? Anything you would like to know more about any of the areas?
Do the poems come after the sculpture? Do they come closely together the way they are created, or is it often after a time after the sculpture? What is the relationship between the two?
Very, very different. It depends. At times I have a poem, an idea, a meditation, and I want to make a sculpture to it. At times I have a sculpture and I write something about it. And at times there are several images to a poem. Like the poems that have Japanese with them, they also have photography. We have been going to Japan for more than 20 years and are very connected with the spirituality of the place there, especially places like Shikoku, where they have 88 temples and shrines out in the nature, and you can hike from one to other. So there would be a picture of a shrine and a poem would come to it, but then also a sculpture would be related to it. So it's diverse. And also I want to keep the meaning and interpretation of a sculpture quite open. So everybody sees something different in them. They are quite organic, but they are not like literally something. I have some that have like a face in them or a finger or actually nipples. I have quite a lot of nipples. But most of them are more abstract. And so I let people see what they see in them, and also myself. It's not always the same, depending on light, depending on what's going on in the world. They might mean something different to me.
Thank you.
Morgana has a hand up.
Yes, I was, of course, Urzula and I met via Interfaith Alignment, and I was really, really struck by the history, her own personal history. It was really very, very moving because, you know, the whole of Europe has had these movements of populations and what have you. But Latvia, I know Urzula didn't mention this, but Latvia was also part of what we call the Hanseatic League. Now, most people haven't a clue what the Hanseatic League is all about. A lot of people in the Netherlands don't either. But the Hansa towns, what it was basically a trading system on water. It's a waterway. So it's basically the waterways above, you know, going towards Denmark and up to the Baltic Sea and connecting via the North Sea again. Urzula, that's why I'm saying, you know, our bioregion, the North Sea, is just so important. And the Dutch were very, very, that's how they ended up in places like Nova Zembla, because they were trading. So they were trading with the Russians, they were trading, but also Latvia was one of the Hanseatic countries. So what did that actually mean? They were there. It was really basically the original European Union.
Yes.
It was actually trading. And if you had furs from Russia, or we had grain from the Netherlands or whatever, and it was just such a wonderful, and it wasn't actually until, I'm not, you know, there came all these tolls and what have you, and then that Hanseatic League kind of fell apart, but it's still very much, Urzula, if you come to the Netherlands, I will love to take you to some of the Hanseatic or the Hansa Staden, when we call them here. So that's really, really also for us, it's part of our background as well. So I'm glad you talked about Latvia as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's very much part of it. And a lot of candles, especially in churches and castles around Europe, came from Latvia during the Middle Ages. And before the trading, we were Vikings. So you find several places around Scandinavia with inscriptions in churches. God protect us from the pestilence and the Baltic Vikings. But trade was very important, and trade is actually very good for peace, because people who trade, they exchange with each other. They get to know each other, and they actually don't want war. And if you have a chance to go to Riga, the capital of Latvia, someday, definitely do, as the Art Nouveau there is absolutely amazing. It's the biggest gathering of Art Nouveau art and buildings in the world. It's absolutely wonderful to see. And also you still have medieval and other parts. And there is a big discussion, but it looks like that historically the very first decorated Christmas tree was put in the very middle of the Hanseatic place in Riga. So there were all the guild houses around. In the middle there was the very first Christmas tree. So the time is up, and I will say goodbye in Latvian, which is uz redzēšanos. I will still stay here if we want to have a conversation.
I wanted to ask something
Yes.
before you leave.
Mhm.
Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Because I don't see her anymore. Okay.
Can hear you.
You said something about the spirit of the sauna, do you, as Latvian, have little spirits or elves or something like that in your history, your spiritual history?
So Latvian spirituality is preserved in songs and stories, and there are quite a lot of traditions. There are not so many elves in that sense, but we have a lot of deities of different places, and one of the main female deities, Laima, is actually associated with saunas. She is the deity of life and of birth, so very close to Sauna, that is where it happened. And also you have some mischievous little spirits. They are called laumas or laumings. They are something a little bit similar to the Celtic pixies. So small, mischievous, usually female figures that do all kind of mischief around water and around people and so on. And what was very sweet for me is the Latvian Lutheran Church split in two during the war, because people who emigrated during the war formed the churches around wherever they were in the world. And the last archbishop was a woman, and guess what her name was? Her name was Lauma, so one of those pixies. And she's a tiny, tiny woman as well.
That's great.
But there are a lot of traditions, and I would definitely recommend watching the film called Smoke Sauna Sisterhood. It is an Estonian film, Estonian together with Iceland. And it's a documentary film about women using an ancient sauna house through the seasons around the year and singing and sharing their stories together. It's a very, very good film. And the sweet thing is it's about 1 hour's drive from my grandmother's house. So I have been to that place many times as a child, not to the sauna house, but to the area. So Smoke Sauna Sisterhood, it's a very, very good one. I will see if I can find a link for people.
And that's in the Harmony Journal, correct? I think we were putting that in there.
Yeah, it will be there if it's not there yet. So, but here it is also in the chat if somebody wants to say it. In general, Latvian culture is very, very connected with nature in many ways. So we spend a lot of time foraging, and we had about 300 different herbal teas in our house for all kind of uses. So very, very close to that. Morgana, you have your hand up.
No, it was just there from the last time. Yeah. But I'd really, really like to thank you again, Urzula. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've had some interesting conversations the last couple of months, and I definitely hope to see you in the Netherlands. I'd love to show you around the Netherlands. So maybe we'll meet in person soon. I hope so anyway. But thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to ask your background, is that the Iona community, or what's behind you?
Yes, so behind me there, it is the Iona Abbey. That's the one with the tower. So the oldest part of it is 9th century, and most of it is from the 13th century. And the little one there in the front is the oldest standing building on Iona, which is St. Orange Chapel. It is 10th or 11th century, and it has very beautiful acoustics. We did quite a lot of singing in it when I was living on Iona.
And again, friends, if you would like to travel to the Iona community, you can click that link I put in the chat at Interfaith Alignment /pilgrimage. We take a trip to Iona, and we'd love to have you join us. And I hope that you all will continue to connect through the day and through the week on the Harmony Journal. Even if it's just to like what someone else has put there, or comment, or post your own picture or thought or video or poem, anything. The more voices we hear, the stronger the work of the Charter for Compassion and the World Interfaith Harmony Week and Interfaith Alignment, and the stronger our work for harmony and compassion and peace in this world. So please add your piece, add your voice, add your presence. So grateful for you all. Thank you, Urzula.
Really from my heart, thank you. And if you want to see more art, there is a link to some more of it.
And before anyone signs off, I'd like to remind you of tomorrow's session, which starts 2 hours earlier at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Dr. Karishma Koka and Mrs. Jaru Pataki Ramahan, and I know you're here with us today. I apologize if I've mispronounced your names. They'll be leading us in living wisdom with action from a Zoroastrian perspective. They'll share their Zoroastrian prayers in the hope of bringing people and organizations together synergistically. Together, they work to share education and sustainable development, learning for progress and well-being for all humanity. We are honored to join their special bond in prayer and unity tomorrow. And this session will also be offered in collaboration with Interfaith Alignment.
Thank you, Steve.
Welcome, and thank you all for being here. This was a lovely presentation. Thank you, Urzula.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being here, and
Bye-bye.
see you all tomorrow.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was great.
Okay. It was lovely.
Yes, yes. I just love it. It's, as I say, it's been absolutely amazing talking to Urzula, because, and she's actually, Steve, she's going to be joining us for Women for Life.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Katema also, that's why I want to,
Oh.
it's a shame she obviously dropped off, but she's, Katema's amazing. I know you know her from the Peace Week, whatever, but she is also joining us for Women for Life Pakistan. She's Afghan as well. So I it was a pity we didn't actually hear her, because she's amazing as well. So we have
She's
some
totally
really amazing ladies, actually.
Yeah.
And including the ladies tomorrow.
Oh, yes. And she pronounces her name Katama.
Yeah,
So it's not
Katama.
Katama, it's Katama.
Yeah, Katama. Yeah, I always forget. I always
Just a little reminder. All these names we're not used to.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Okay, see you all. Get some rest.
Yeah, so this is my 4th Zoom meeting, Margaret.
Hopefully your last.
Oh, I've got my eyes like this.
I know, I've been running around all day. That was me running from 2 other.
Oh,
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
life.
but I'll see you tomorrow. I should have been in Amsterdam, actually, Steve, because Marilyn and Lynn, they've got a meeting set up in Amsterdam, but I said I can't because I have to have a stable internet connection. So unfortunately, I'm not able to join them in Amsterdam tomorrow. Anyway, not to worry.
That's too bad, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See you tomorrow then.
Yes, indeed.
Bye all.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.